In our last lecture, we were looking at matrix conditioning. So matrix conditioning allows us to separate bad matrices from good matrices. And we know when the calculations can go wrong because the matrix is bad, and we are able to make a judgment on the quality of solution for linear algebraic equations. So I gave a very simple example, polynomial approximation. Some continuous function, you are trying to approximate f of x. F of z is some function which you are trying to approximate, and then if you develop an approximation which is polynomial approximation, then in polynomial approximations we have shown that you get equations of the type h theta is equal to u. So H is the Hilbert matrix, theta is the parameter vector, parameters of your polynomial coefficients, and u is the, depending upon how you have formulated the problem, you will be a vector which is a finite dimensional vector. And this is exactly like solving Ax equal to b. X is theta, b is u, and A is matrix H. And what I showed you last time was that H3 is Hilbert matrix, which is 1, half, 1/3, half, 1/3, 1/4, and well, I'll just write this here. Okay, so this is my H matrix. Okay, and then I took a solution here. My right hand side was 11 by 6, 13 by 12, and 47 by 60, when theta is equal to 1, 1, 1 transpose. Okay, when theta is equal to 1, 1, 1 unit vector, 1, 1 not unit vector, one vector containing 3 1, 1, 1s, your right hand side will be this, and this is the exact solution. Okay, I just showed you how things can go wrong even for this matrix, for which the condition number is not so bad. The condition number we found here was 408. No, condition number we found here was 748. Okay, so for this particular matrix, condition number C infinity or C infinity of H3 was 748. Okay, I just showed you how things can go wrong. Instead of solving this problem, instead of solving the original problem, we solved slightly modified version of this problem, which is 1.5, 0.333, 0.5, 0.333, and 0.25. this is my, this matrix I would say is my H3 plus delta H3. This matrix has a slight error, right? This matrix has a slight error as compared to the original matrix H3. So if I start doing computations with this matrix, and instead of this U, if I take slightly perturbed U, which is 1.83, actually I have done is I have just truncated the fractions, okay, just truncated the fractions. 1.08 and 0.783. Okay, so this is my U plus delta U. I just change, I am just calling this U plus delta U because I am truncated. I decided to truncate and write the same equation. My solution changed so drastically, 1.09, so this is my theta plus delta theta. Okay, this is my theta plus delta theta. This is for a matrix for which you have condition number of 700. Okay, so actually if I try to estimate what is the fractional change that we have made on in H matrix or in U matrix, it is of the order of 0.3%. Okay, of the order of 0.3% change, 0.3% error. I can find this error using norms. Norm of delta H3 by norm of H3, okay, or norm of delta U divided by norm of U. I can find out what is the percentage change if it is of the order of 0.3%, okay, but the solution changes by almost 50%. Drastic change in the solution, just because, and here whatever you try to do, you do maximal pivoting, you do whatever reordering of the calculations, you will get into trouble. That is because this matrix is ill conditioned. Okay. Now the example that we gave earlier, that I gave you earlier, 2 cross 2 example, might lead you to believe that it's something to do with singular matrices. This has nothing to do with singularity. What matters here is the condition number. Condition number, if you take in terms of 2 norm, okay, condition number is ratio or square root of ratio of the singular values of the matrix. Largest singular value by smallest singular value. Find eigenvalues of A transpose A and take ratio of maximum eigenvalue of A transpose A by minimum eigenvalue of A transpose A, find the square root. That is what matters. Okay, if that ratio is small, okay, if that ratio is small, matrix, then the matrix is well conditioned. That ratio is large, okay, individual eigenvalue may not be equal to 0, but if that ratio of the largest eigenvalue of A transpose A to smallest eigenvalue of A transpose A, if that ratio is large, matrix is ill conditioned, and that's what can create problem for you using any sophisticated program or any sophisticated computer. It will create a problem for you. So that is inherent problem with the matrix, not the problem with the computer or the program. Okay. So there is one more example which I have given here to, I will not write the numbers because the numbers are very small, but I have tried to show here in this example is that very simple example. I think I demonstrated this to you. This A matrix, okay, this simple A matrix 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Okay, this is not called by any name, just this particular matrix is highly ill conditioned. Okay, condition number of this matrix, it appears, what is there, you have just written 1 to 9 numbers in the particular sequence. The condition number of this matrix, if you ask the condition number, that is C2 of A, okay, so which is square root of lambda max of A transpose A by lambda min. Okay, lambda min of A transpose A. This is this turns out to be 3.81 into 10 to the power 16. Okay, condition number of this matrix is very, very large. You can do a simple experiment in MATLAB or Scilab or any software. Take this matrix, okay, find its inverse. Well, MATLAB will give you a warning. This matrix is highly ill conditioned. The results may not be reliable. And you can check that. If you find inverse of this matrix, and what should happen if you find inverse of this matrix and multiply with it, the matrix itself, you should get identity matrix. Okay. If you do that experiment in numerical experiment in MATLAB, you will get matrix which has nothing to do with identity matrix. You will get some other matrix. You get numbers like 2, 8, 18 when you multiply A into A inverse for this matrix, because this is highly ill conditioned matrix. Okay, and then I have given one more example. So what I want to stress here is that inherently a given matrix is, every matrix will come with its own characteristics, and then that will dictate how the calculations proceed. Okay, and you should be able to recognize bad matrices or ill conditioned matrices. Okay, there is one more matrix I have shown here. Okay, for this matrix, if you do A into A inverse, you can do that experiment in MATLAB. You will never get identity matrix, but I will give you another matrix in 10 to the power minus 17, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I have taken this matrix. Okay. Now you might say that this matrix is it like a null matrix? 10 to the power minus 17 into 1, 10 to the power minus 17 into 2. Okay, it looks like a null matrix, right? All the elements of this matrix are close to 0. Though I have written here 1 to 1, it's multiplied by 10 to the power minus 17. Okay. Now if I do inversion of this matrix, okay, now if I do inversion of this matrix and then multiply inverse of this matrix into B matrix, MATLAB will give you perfect identity matrix back. Why? Condition number of this matrix, even though this is like a null matrix, all elements are close to 0. Okay, the condition number of this matrix C2B, it turns out to be 5.474. Very well conditioned matrix, no problems with the calculations. Okay, that's because if you take B transpose B, find out its maximum eigenvalue, minimum eigenvalue, take a ratio, that will come out to be this, and square root of that, it will come out to be this. So this means inherently you are not going to get into any trouble when you do calculations with this matrix, which is close to null matrix. Its eigenvalues are very close to 0. Okay, that doesn't matter. What matters is the condition number. What matters is the ratio of maximum to minimum singular value, square root of, that's what dictates the calculations. Okay. So with this we come to an end of discussion on linear algebraic equations. We looked at many things. We looked at, I suppose you have learned much more than what you know about solving linear algebraic equations as compared to your undergraduate courses on Ax equal to b. You probably thought you knew everything about Ax equal to b, right? Gaussian elimination, and then you are done. But what you see here is far more than what you know. We looked at sparse matrix methods, okay, efficient way of calculating. That too, I just could cover a few of them just to give you a taste of what it is. It's much more to it. There is a sparse matrix toolbox in MATLAB or Scilab. You know, there are many routines which exploit spatial structure of a matrix and do fast computations. The reason for introducing sparse matrix was to sensitize you that there exists something called sparse matrix computations. So in your problem, in your MTech problem or PhD problem, when you hit upon large scale matrices, try to look for sparse matrix. Try to exploit sparsity if you can. You can make your computations very fast. Okay. Then, next thing we looked at was iterative methods. Iterative methods like Jacobi method, Gauss-Seidel method, and so on. Okay. Iterative methods in general, it's difficult to prove, but in general they work faster than these Gaussian elimination, particularly for large scale matrices. We looked at two classes of iterative methods. One was Gauss-Seidel, those kind of methods. The other one was optimization based, gradient method, conjugate gradient method, and so on. So we looked at two classes. In particular, for Jacobi method and Gauss-Seidel method, those kind of methods, we also analyzed the convergence behavior. When are you guaranteed to converge to a solution of Ax equal to b? Okay. So we looked at convergence properties. We also looked at how to tweak my problem to ensure convergence. Okay. So now we have broadened our base, our toolkit for solving Ax equal to b. We have many more methods now for solving Ax equal to b. Moreover, we know what really matters in iterative methods: eigenvalues. Eigenvalue problem, probably unexpectedly propped up when you try to analyze this. It's not really unexpected. It's eigenvalue problems have come when you try to analyze linear difference equations. And then we related, spectral radius. We related the maximum magnitude eigenvalue of certain matrix. If it is inside unit circle, we said that we are guaranteed convergence, and so on. We also looked at some theorems to ensure convergence, right? So, and then finally we moved to this matrix conditioning. Try to weed out good matrices and bad matrices. Weed out bad matrices from the set of matrices. So we know now how to judge whether a matrix is bad, and that's why you are getting wrong answers, or your problem formulation, the strategy for computing is bad, and matrix is good, but you have made mistakes. So you know how to distinguish between these two. So with this, now you have a good idea of how to deal with Ax equal to b. Now let's move on. Let's move on to solving nonlinear algebraic equations. So that's what I'm going to do next. I uploaded my notes. Okay. For this, so we now start with the next tool. So let me draw the diagram again, that just to bring you back to the entire theme of this course. We have this original problem. We have this mathematical model and some problem which we cannot solve directly. So we use this. Okay, we had a mathematical model and some original problem that we wanted to solve. So using approximation theory, we transform this problem to a computable form. Okay, and then we said we are going to look at 4 different tools, or there are 4 different approaches typically to solve this problem. I am going to cover 3 of them. So one is solving Ax equal to b. Okay, it could be using this tool to solve this problem. Okay, or I could be using solving f of x equal to 0, it is quite likely that to do this I might be using this Newton's method. I am using ax equal to b to solve. Okay. So this could be directly being used or it could be indirectly being used, we do not know. The third tool which is ODE initial value problem solvers, IVP solvers, all this Euler method, Runge-Kutta method. So the third one which we are going to look at is that IVP solvers, and of course the fourth tool is the stochastic tool, which I am not going to look at the stochastic tool. So this one we are done with. I am moving to this tool now, and towards the end of the course we would be covering this. This will be left untouched because it probably would need one more course to cover stochastic tools, and what you get here is the approximate solution. This is the approximate solution for the original problem that you get. So this is done. We are moving to this. Okay. Eventually we'll move to this, and that is end of the course. So this is the overall structure, just to get back on the, just to give you a global picture of what has been happening. Okay. So now let's move on to f of x equal to 0, solving nonlinear algebraic equations. We have already done something about this. We have already derived Newton's method starting from Taylor series approximations, right? Now you might wonder, well, I know Newton's method, what's there? Why do I need many more things? But just like Gaussian elimination is one way of solving linear algebraic equations, you will realize that Newton's method is just one approach. There are many ways of doing it, and the reason why there are many ways of doing it is because there is no method which is panacea, one method which works for everything. Sometimes one approach works better, sometimes the other approach works better. So you have to be ready with multiple tools, and use appropriate tool whenever required. In some cases you don't require Newton's method. Some cases it is not possible to apply Newton's method because Newton's method requires Jacobian calculations. If I have 100 equations in 100 unknowns, okay, you have seen that kind of scenario in solving partial differential equations. Developing a matrix, even if it is numerically, developing a matrix 100 cross 100 at each iteration, it's painful, it's computationally intensive. And just imagine if you are trying to solve steady state simulation of a complete chemical plant, thousands of equations to be solved simultaneously, right? Thousands of equations to be solved simultaneously. If you are trying to simulate a section of a plant, many thousand equations, nonlinear algebraic equations to be solved simultaneously. If you have to compute Jacobian even numerically, okay, it is not an easy task. Okay, so we have to see what has happened is, as computers have become more and more powerful, we are also trying to solve problems which are larger and larger problems. Okay, 25-30 years back probably nobody thought of solving 1000 equations in 1000 unknowns in a classroom. Now you can do it as a part of your assignment, okay, which would be probably an MTech thesis some time back. So things have changed because of what we want to solve with growing power of computers also has changed. So there are problems which earlier with slow computers would take days to solve. Well, now also there are problems which take days to solve, except what you are trying now is different from what you were trying earlier. Okay, so even with very fast computers and very fast good software, you still have problems which are, and there is no end to this. This will just keep on growing. Okay, so now let's look at different methods for solving nonlinear algebraic equations. Okay. So I can now just work with abstract forms because you have seen many examples where you have to solve nonlinear algebraic equations. So my intention is to solve fi x equal to 0, where I goes from 1 to n, x belongs to Rn. Okay, or now we are comfortable with the notion of a function vector, or I can write this into function vector fx is equal to 0, same problem, right? Fx equal to 0, where f is a map from Rn to Rn. More sophisticated way of writing the same thing is that f is a function vector. Okay, you are trying to look for that value of x where f of x will give you 0 vector. This is 0 vector, f of x equal to 0. F is a map from Rn to Rn, n dimension to n dimensions. Okay, so these are the kind of equations that we are interested in solving. Okay, what would be the simplest method? So first of all, you know, for solving nonlinear algebraic equations, except for some very special cases where you can solve them analytically, if you remove those, you know, small set of problems where, for example, you can solve multi-dimensional quadratic equations simultaneously. You can construct, just like you can solve one-dimensional quadratic equations simultaneously, you can solve multivariable quadratic equations simultaneously. But these kind of analytical solutions are very few. In general, even if you have a polynomial of nth order in one variable, you cannot solve it analytically. Okay, it's very difficult to construct solutions or roots of that equation. Okay, so we need methods that can solve nonlinear algebraic equations. Well, one thing I would say is that if there are methods which require less computations, better it is. Now, first of all, let's look at methods which do not require derivative calculations. Okay, I want to solve f of x equal to 0 without having to compute derivatives, or even if I have to compute derivatives, I can do it in some simple way rather than computing entire Jacobian. So I am going to give you a gradation of methods. Okay, finally we will of course move to Newton's method. But in Newton's method, you know, the problem step in terms of large computations is Jacobian calculations. Okay, so there are methods which can do what is called as a Jacobian update. Okay, so Jacobian updates do not require explicit differentiation. They try to construct an approximate Jacobian by using last value of the Jacobian and adding some correction because you have moved to a new point. Okay, these methods, broadly called as Broyden updates or quasi-Newton methods, is also what we will look at. Okay, so the first method, class of methods, I am going to call, these are known as, well, in iterative schemes everything is successive substitutions, but this class is also specially known as successive substitution methods. What I mean here by successive substitution methods is this subclass of methods by which you don't have to compute any derivative. Okay, that's what I mean right now. In general, every method that we are looking at, iterative method, is successive substitution. Okay, so the question is, can I arrange my calculations in such a way that I start with some initial guess x naught. Okay, I start with some initial guess x naught, and then I generate a new guess. From the old guess. Okay, I want to solve for f of x equal to 0. Okay, in some situations, in some problems, for example, tubular reactor with axial mixing, that problem which we have been taking as a theme example throughout the course. Okay, you can rearrange these equations f of x equal to 0 into a special form a x is equal to g of x, where a is a constant matrix, and g is some nonlinear function. So actually, if you want to see what is f of x is nothing but ax minus gx. Okay, trying to solve f of x equal to 0 in this particular case reduces to this problem. In some cases like tubular reactor, axial mixing, or some other PDEs, you might get naturally this kind of a form. Okay, another way of creating this form is just add x on both sides. If I add x on both sides and call this as g of x, okay, so this is x is equal to g of x. Or I could do in general more, some matrix here, bx is equal to, so the form is same. So I can either do this transformation, or in some cases the problem discretization will yield this kind of a form, okay, depending upon what kind of structure the problem has. So you get this special form. Now what can I do with this? So if I have this spatial form ax is equal to g of x, okay, I could convert this into solving linear algebraic equations, okay, by a very simple trick. So if I start with some initial guess, let x naught is my initial guess. X naught is my initial guess. Okay. Then what I am going to do, I am going to solve for ax k plus 1 is equal to g of Is everyone with me on this? See, I start with x0. If I substitute x0 here, I can compute this g of x. This is known to me. What is not known to me? xk plus 1. x1 is not known to me. But then it becomes a linear algebraic equation. This is b, this is a, this is a, ax equal to b. I can solve for xk plus 1. Then I can solve for xk plus 1 using any method of ax equal to b, Gaussian elimination or Gauss-Seidel method or whatever. So, so this will generate an iteration, and when do you terminate? What is the advantage of doing this? I am not computing Jacobian. So I will terminate my iterations when xk plus 1 minus okay, so this is less than some epsilon. I will terminate when this becomes less than epsilon. I will terminate my iterations. Okay, this method in general, it looks very simple to formulate, no Jacobians. Okay, you can compute, well, this method in some cases does work, and when we move on to implicit methods for solving ODE initial value problems, we will see merit in using this method. Okay. What is very critical here is that this method will converge if you give an initial guess which is very close to the solution. Okay. When will this method converge? How will it converge? We will postpone that discussion to a little later part. I will discuss about that towards the end. At least I will mention about it, though we cannot go too much into details. This particular method, if you give a good initial guess, okay, reasonable initial guess, this method will converge to the solution. Okay, generating good initial guess may not be always possible, particularly for large problems. If you have solving simulation for, steady state simulation of an entire section of a plant, generating initial guess is no joke. It's quite difficult. Okay, so it might be difficult to use it there, but in some small problems where you can generate initial guess quite well. For example, implicit Newton method or trapezoidal rule, where you can use explicit method to create a good guess for the implicit method. This method will work quite well. Okay, so this kind of. Now, while implementing these kind of methods, I can also have variations which are similar to Jacobi method, which are similar to Gauss-Seidel method, which are similar to relaxation method. So, I am now going to talk about variants of successive substitution method which are like Jacobi method or which are like Gauss-Seidel method. Okay. So, when I do that, I cannot of course use this vector matrix rotation. What we did in Jacobi method, we went equation by equation. You remember? We went equation by equation. So, the same thing I am going to do here. So, I go back to my original form. So, instead of writing the equations that I want to solve, I am going to rearrange into this form. X I is equal to G I X for I is equal to 1, 2, okay, where G of X is nothing but G1X, G2X. This small g is nothing but one element in the function vector. Okay, I am looking at element by element. Converting into this form is not difficult. I can pre-multiply both the sides by A inverse. So it will be X is equal to, okay. Removing A matrix is not a big deal. Okay, so now suppose I have this equation, and then how will you form Jacobi like iterations? My Jacobi iterations will be xi k plus 1 is equal to gi of x k. Okay, I am going to use the old value and create new value. Okay, for I is equal to 1 to n. How will you create Gauss-Seidel like iterations? Use the new value as it get created. Okay, so Gauss-Seidel iterations is a concept. You can use it in context of linear algebraic equations, you can use it in the context of nonlinear algebraic equations. If you understand the concept, you can do relaxation iterations, same ideas. Okay, so my first equation will be x1 k plus 1 is equal to g1 xk. This is my first equation. Okay, my second equation, that is x2 k plus 1, will be g2. Now here I will use x1 k plus 1, okay, I will use x2k, x3k, xnk. Well, unlike the linear algebraic equation, x2 will appear on both sides because these are nonlinear equations, you may not be able to separate them. What will be my x3k, k plus 1? This will use g3 x1 k plus 1, x2 k plus 1, x3k. Is this clear? See, as and when the new value gets created, I am using it in the next equation. I am solving n equation by equation. Okay, I am solving equation by equation. Okay, one equation at a time. Okay, this would be Gauss seidel iteration. Okay, and I can write a generic form for this. Okay, for ith case, you use new values up to I minus 1 and old values for I to n. Okay, so you can write a generic form for this. How will you create the iteration for relaxation method? X new will be xk plus omega times the Gauss seidel step, where omega is greater than 1 or less than 1 depending upon. Here it is difficult to say whether the convergence will occur between 0 to 2 and all that. It's not possible to say here. Okay. In linear case, we could say that we could give necessary sufficient conditions for convergence. It is not possible to do that here. Okay. So inherently, because you are using the old value, new value every time it's generated, one would expect that this Gauss seidel iterations will converge faster than the Jacobi iterations and so on. So this iterations would be better in terms of convergence properties than this cannot be proved, but at least you can hope that this correction will. So one can devise relaxation iterations here by saying xi k plus 1 is equal to xi k plus omega times. So you make one Gauss seidel iteration, choose an omega which is positive, omega greater than 0, and create a new guess which amplifies the change predicted by the Gaussian step, Gauss seidel step, and so on. So one can have all these kind of variations here. Okay, so these methods are, advantage of these methods is that no gradient evaluation, no Jacobian calculations. Okay, the flip side is that they will converge if you have a good initial guess. Okay, if without gradient calculations, if you have a good initial guess and if it works, great. You are able to save on computations. You can solve the equations very fast. If not, you will have to go for gradient based calculations. Now I want to talk about one method which is in between. Okay, this method will use gradient evaluations, okay, but will not do the full Jacobian. Okay, will not do the full Jacobian. It only calculates some gradients, and so this particular method is called as Wettstein method or multivariate secant method. Okay, so let's move on to now gradient based methods. Okay, so in the class of derivative based methods, we have already looked at Newton's method. Okay, now I am going to revisit Newton's method for the univariate case. Why I am looking at this will become clear soon, because I want to talk about this intermediate method called Wettstein method. So the motivation comes from univariate methods. So univariate method, Newton's method, if I have f of x equal to 0 where x belongs to R, I want to solve one variable equation f of x equal to 0. Okay. Newton's method, of course, if this function is differentiable, you can write xk plus 1 is equal to xk minus f of xk divided by I can write this as f of xk by f prime xk, derivative of f with respect to x. Okay, we can have a slight variation of this method. This is the classical Newton's method. There is a slight variation of this method called secant method. In secant method, what we do is this f prime xk, we approximate this derivative. We approximate this derivative using last two iterates. Okay, so we approximate this as f xk minus f xk minus 1 divided by this small variation is called as secant method, where this f prime xk is replaced by an approximation of the derivative. Okay, here this is not in the true sense need not be a good approximation, because delta x xk minus 1 need not be small. Okay, so this may not be a good approximation, but this method works quite well for many simple problems. So this variation is called as secant method, where now to kick off the secant method you need two initial guesses, not one initial guess. You need two initial guesses, x0, x1, then you can create the next get x2 starting from x0, x1, because this gradient calculation will require x0, x1, then you compute the gradient from two initial guesses, and then you can move on to the the x2, then from x2, x1 you can create x3, from x3, x2 you can create x4, and so on. Okay, so you start with two initial guesses, x0, x1, create x2, using x2, x1 create x3, and so on. Okay, there is one more variation of this method called as regula falsi. Probably all these method names which I am talking about right now might be familiar to you from your BTech background, because one variable Newton's method, secant method, and regula falsi are typically taught in the undergraduate curriculum. The slight variation, okay, this is based on the observation that if you have, this is my x and I am plotting f of x. Okay, f of x has some behavior like this. I am looking for this point where f of x equal to 0, right? I am looking for this point, or I am looking for this point where f of x is equal to 0. I am looking for roots of the equation f of x equal to 0, which means I am looking for point where f of x reduces to 0, value of x for which f of x becomes 0. Okay. Now, one observation is that whenever there is an interval in which f of x has positive sign on one side and f of x has negative sign on the other side, f of x crosses 0. If f of x is a continuous function, okay, it will cross 0 somewhere, at least once. It may be multiple times, okay, we do not know, but at least once it crosses 0. Okay, so this regula falsi method actually tries to use this idea and makes a modification to secant method. Okay, so it starts with two initial guesses. Okay, so it will start with x0 and x1 such that function evaluated at x0 and function evaluated at x1 have opposite sign. Okay, evaluated at x0 and x1 have opposite sign, and then as it does proceed in the calculations, it tries to maintain this. Okay, it tries to maintain the fact that the two successive guesses should always have function values which are opposite sign. If that is maintained, then convergence to the solution can be faster. Okay, so this regula falsi, so this is where f of x k is greater than 0, and this is where f of xk is less than 0. If you have a scenario where function value changes sign from positive to negative, this is only true for a one variable function, not for, difficult to say something like this for a multivariable function. For one variable function, multivariable function vector, I am talking of one variable scalar function. Changes sign at two different points, then there is a root somewhere in between. Okay, that is the idea. So the modification here is that I'll just write down this modification here, because okay, you carry out the iterations by this formula if it is less than 0, and the second case is so whether you use xk or whether you use xk minus 1 when you move forward, okay, to compute the derivative approximation, okay, that will be based on the sign of f of xk plus 1 which you get. Okay, so when you go for the new iteration calculations, you keep checking the sign, and based on the sign you make a judgment as to how to proceed further. So this is regular falsy approximation. Now what I am going to do next is use this univariate method. I am going to use univariate secant method and create a multivariate secant method. Okay, this multivariate secant method is called as Weckstein method. The advantage of multivariate secant method is that number of Jacobians or the number of derivative calculations is very, very small, equal to number of equations. Whereas in Newton's method, the classical Newton method, you have to compute the full Jacobian, n cross n elements, okay, which can be quite large. Okay, so if you see this softwares like Aspen Plus, they seem to be preferring this Weckstein method, which works quite well, which is multivariate secant method. So we'll look at it in our next lecture.